The myth of hidden Nevada. Mention Nevada to most Americans, and two images appear: Las Vegas glowing like a circuit board and Area 51 buried in rumor. Between them lies the mystery that keeps the rest of the state empty. For decades, secrecy and storytelling have filled the vacuum left by policy and geography, turning blank land into cultural legend. What began as military necessity became folklore, and that folklore still shapes how millions imagine the desert. Alluring, forbidden, maybe dangerous. The myth of hidden Nevada starts with geography itself. Seen from above, the state looks like a vast labyrinth of closed ranges, dry lakes, and unnamed valleys. The emptiness begs a question: what's in there? Whenever government fences cut off public access, imagination supplies answers. By the late 20th century, that imagination had condensed into a single point on the map: Area 51. Tucked inside the Nevada Test and Training Range, this site officially doesn't appear on civilian flight maps. For years, it didn't even appear in congressional budgets. Locals in the 195s noticed strange lights darting above Groom Lake. They wrote letters, called newspapers, and watched reporters struggle to explain aircraft that didn't exist publicly. In truth, those lights came from the U-2 program, and later, there are 12 and SR-71 reconnaissance planes, projects so secret that even most Air Force personnel had no clearance to know. The faster the planes grew, the faster the stories spread. By the time television turned flying saucers into household images, the Nevada desert had already become the stage. When Hollywood needed landscapes that looked alien, directors filmed outside Tonopah or around Pyramid Lake. Real testing and fictional invasion merged until secrecy itself became entertainment. Area 51 slipped from classified project to pop icon. Each attempt to deny its existence only amplified fascination. Government silence did more than protect defense programs, it fed national distrust. During the Cold War, Americans watched mushroom clouds bloom 50 miles from Las Vegas casino balconies, yet officials insisted radiation posed no risk. Decades later, cancer clusters and declassified footage told a different story. That dissonance cemented a suspicion that what happens in the desert stays hidden for reasons beyond safety. The pattern repeated through drone testing, stealth experiments, and alleged crashed object recoveries. Even after the CIA's 2013 acknowledgement of the site, curiosity didn't fade. It matured into permanent mythology. Drive north along State Route 375, the so-called Extraterrestrial Highway, and you'll see how folklore transformed isolation into economy. The town of Rachel, population barely 50, survives on the legend. Cafes serve alien burgers, souvenir shops sell mock security badges, and nightly sky watchers line the roadside with telescopes hoping to spot a craft, or at least something they can't explain. Ironically, the military bases that make the region off-limits also keep its tourism alive. Visitors come for the secrecy. The forbidden landscape sells better than open access ever could. The Sheehan family knows the intersection of myth and reality more intimately than anyone. For nearly 130 years, they've owned a 400-acre parcel called Groom Mine, enclosed on three sides by expanding test range borders. Their ancestors mined silver long before the government arrived. Over time, the Air Force bought or seized every neighboring claim, citing national security. The Sheehans held out, watching bomb tests scorch horizons they once prospected. In 2014, federal agents offered $5.4 million for the property. The family refused, valuing generations of work at 5 times that. Their protest became a modern Western saga, independent landowners versus an invisible empire. That dispute underscored Nevada's central paradox: private ownership colliding with national secrecy. Courts eventually sided with the government, and Groom Mine fell into restricted territory. The Sheehans' fate mirrored the state's, surrounded by fences built for purposes they didn't choose. Yet their story also became part of the desert's mystique, proof that ordinary citizens could stumble into extraordinary secrets just by standing their ground. Beyond Area 51, hidden Nevada multiplies. To the west, the former Nevada test site scars remain sealed beneath military oversight. Pilots training above rarely think about the craters beneath them, but satellite images reveal circles of glass where Earth once erupted under nuclear heat. Tourists glimpsing them online imagine conspiracies. Scientists studying them see geology transformed by politics. The truth sits somewhere between, quiet and uninviting, like the desert itself. Ghost stories cling to these places because the facts are incomplete by design. Classified projects, environmental restrictions, and lingering radiation exclude documentation. The absence of evidence becomes narrative fuel. People fill the blanks with aliens, secret weapons, portals, anything that gives shape to silence. In doing so, they keep attention on the state even as its population concentrates elsewhere. Nevada remains visible through invisibility. Its emptiness becomes a screen for collective speculation. Media amplification plays its role. Radio hosts in the 199s broadcast late-night tales of UFO chases through the desert. Documentaries promised revelations just beyond the fence line. Each production blurred boundaries between fact and fiction further. By the time social media took over, the myth had matured into participatory folklore. The 2019 Storm Area 51 event, conceived as a joke online, drew thousands of visitors to Rachel, proving that even implausible ideas can mobilize masses if bound to the mystique of Nevada's restricted zones. The military's polite warning not to trespass only added fuel. Nothing enhances curiosity like a locked gate. Culturally, hidden Nevada functions as a mirror for American contradictions. People distrust authority yet crave protection. They worship openness but rely on secrecy to feel secure. The same citizens who decry government cover-ups also marvel at the advanced aircraft those cover-ups produced. Area 51 encapsulates that tension, proof that mystery can be both a nuisance and a national asset. Every conspiracy commercializes the very secrecy it criticizes. Economically, the myths sustain pockets of survival in otherwise barren counties. Lodges, tour companies, and roadside shops depend on legend. In Lincoln and Nye counties, officials quietly balance promotion with caution. They want visitors, not trespassers. The irony is hard to miss. The same fences that repel settlement attract tourism. Nevada's most profitable rural identity isn't agriculture or mining anymore, it's curiosity management. Yet behind the humor lies the heavier truth that myth replaces explanation when transparency fails. Locals living near these zones describe strange skies not as paranormal but as routine. They hear sonic booms, see lights zigzag at impossible angles and shrug, it's just testing. For them, mystery is noise pollution. For outsiders, it's revelation. The gap between experience and perception reinforces Nevada's isolation more effectively than geography ever could. Even science hasn't escaped enchantment with the desert's secrecy. Astronomers prize the darkness, geologists study ancient lake beds, yet public fascination always drifts back to what's unseen. The focus on speculation masks the state's real drama, how geography and governance cooperate to keep most of it uninhabited. The myth diverts curiosity from structural constraints toward cosmic fantasies. It's easier to believe aliens guard the border than to accept zoning regulations and defense contracts do. This sleight of hand benefits everyone involved. The military maintains its silence under cover of entertainment. The tourism industry thrives on ambiguity. Residents inherit a protective shield of disinterest from the rest of the nation. As long as Nevada seems mysterious, few question why so much land remains off limits. Folklore becomes function, a cultural firewall preserving the very emptiness that inspired it. And still, the stories evolve. New drone prototypes replace old sources. Each generation invents its own mystery to explain the lights above Groom Lake. What almost no one acknowledges is how these myths reflect something quintessentially American, the urge to fill wide spaces with meaning when physical occupation proves impossible. Nevada's isolation demands narrative, otherwise the silence would feel accusatory. So the myth persists, layered atop every restriction and empty valley like desert varnish on stone. Visitors chase answers, locals mind their routines, and the fences gleam quietly under sun and starlight. The real hidden Nevada isn't underground hangars or alien vaults. It's the psychological comfort secrecy provides to a nation uneasy with emptiness. The desert's greatest secret is that there might be none at all, just protected land serving practical purposes, wrapped in stories that keep it sacred. That realization flips the legend inside out. For all its alien lore and government intrigue, Nevada hides nothing mystical, only the evidence of how power, policy, and imagination intertwine. The myths endure because they make emptiness meaningful, transforming restricted space into national narrative. In that sense, the desert was never simply avoided, it was mythologized into permanence. Beneath the blue beyond and the warning signs, Nevada's silence hums with an old truth. Secrecy is simply another way of being seen. The price of emptiness. Stand at the edge of a map of Nevada, and what you'll notice first is what's there, it's what's missing. Between its city clusters lie oceans of vacancy, millions of acres where human life barely flickers. Yet this emptiness, far from being accidental, carries a cost and a purpose. It's the result of bargains made between ecology, economy, and national security, trade-offs that turn geography into policy and silence into strategy. Nevada's emptiness looks free, but it's expensive to maintain. Consider the math. Despite enormous territory, Nevada's population hovers around 3.5 million, concentrated almost entirely in two metropolitan areas, Las Vegas and Reno. The other counties combined account for less than 300,000 people scattered across tens of thousands of square miles. When you compare population density to states of similar size, the disparity borders on absurd. New York packs over 400 people per square mile, Nevada manages barely 30, and most of those along the California border. For a modern nation obsessed with growth, that stillness feels almost defiant. Infrastructure follows that imbalance. The farther you drive from the lights, the thinner the connections become, roads narrow, signals vanish, public services wither. Counties that stretch longer than some countries share one hospital or one high school. The costs of maintaining utilities across such vast emptiness outpace tax revenue, locking rural economies into perpetual triage. Electricity grids, broadband cables, even postal networks survive through federal subsidy rather than local sustainability. The state doesn't just contain emptiness, it funds it, nurtures it, and protects it. This preservation carries ironies. Federal ownership, originally meant to regulate grazing and mining, effectively created a national buffer zone, land undeveloped by design. Environmentalists see victory, protected ecosystems, clean night skies, habitats untouched. The Pentagon sees security, guaranteed isolation for testing, training, and defense. Economists, though, see a frozen asset, millions of acres that generate no taxable wealth. The outcome is balance through imbalance. Nevada's space serves everyone except the people who might live on it. Take Lincoln County as an example. It covers more than 10,000 square miles, yet houses fewer than 5,000 residents. Roads ribbon through basins where even gas stations can't profit from the distance between customers. County officials rely heavily on federal payments known as PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, compensation for land that can't be taxed. It keeps budgets afloat, but it also cements dependency. Every fiscal year becomes a negotiation between Congress and county survival. In a literal sense, emptiness must be subsidized. Across the state, a similar pattern repeats. Hawthorne thrives because the Army Depot contracts need safe distance. Tonopah endures on military maintenance jobs and astronomical tourism drawn by dark skies protected from excessive lighting. Austin leans on heritage tourism, Ely on prison employment, and small mining revivals. None of these communities were built for expansion, they were designed to persist. Each exists as a kind of economic settlement within a wilderness of inaccessibility, a pattern where survival equals stagnation and decline equals preservation. This paradox folds into cultural identity. To most Nevadans, emptiness isn't failure, it's authenticity. Locals wear sparse population as proof of endurance. We choose the space, they say, echoing a quiet pride in isolation, but that pride coexists with frustration. Teens leave for college and rarely return because opportunity hides elsewhere. Local elections debate how to attract business while preserving character, but the ratio never changes. 2 cities boom, 12 counties tread water. The state's identity as a frontier survives by never fully ending the frontier era. Economically, the cost of isolation shows up in ordinary transactions. Shipping a simple building supply from Reno to Ely can triple its price. Fuel deliveries depend on long-haul trucking, constrained by mountain passes that close under snow. Remote healthcare requires flying patients hundreds of miles to specialists. Every service duplicates urban infrastructure at higher expense for fewer users. Analysts call this emptiness inflation, the economic penalty for distance. The landscape's beauty hides a constant arithmetic of scarcity. And yet the very forces that limit growth underpin Nevada's modern value. Those endless training ranges bring billions in defense contracts. The desolate basins attract renewable energy developers hunting space for solar and geothermal fields. Dark skies lure astronomers, untouched wilderness sells solitude. Tourism built on absence thrives, off-roaders chasing silence, photographers capturing isolation, city dwellers renting cabins just to escape noise. Emptiness becomes product. Nevada profits by staying unoccupied. Still, that strategy carries ecological and emotional weight. The fewer people who live in these valleys, the easier it is to forget they need care. Public lands risk sliding from stewardship into abstraction, spaces administered on paper more than patrolled on ground. Wildfires now sweep unchecked across remote counties where firefighting budgets can't keep pace. Invasive species creep over fences no one maintains. Conservation depends on watchers, but the watchers keep leaving. Neglect, once deliberate, drifts into default. For policymakers, the dilemma is philosophical as much as logistical. Should emptiness remain sacred, or should it evolve? Some argue that preserving vast undeveloped land is America's most successful environmental policy, a buffer against overpopulation and carbon buildout. Others see stagnation masquerading as virtue. The common ground is recognition that any shift would be monumental. Releasing even a small fraction of federal territory or revising water rights could alter the entire Western settlement map. So inertia wins, preserving the pattern at the price of possibility. Look closer at the statistics, and the feedback loop becomes clear. Limited land ownership suppresses housing, scarce housing curtails population, small populations weaken political influence, weak influence prevents land policy reform. The same circle spins year after year. It's not a conspiracy, just the natural outcome of forces shaped by centuries of desert management. Nevada's emptiness perpetuates itself, not through rejection, but through routine. And behind the data lies emotion. Travelers often describe the desert as calming, even spiritual. Locals describe it as honest, a place that reflects effort without apology. Life here requires acceptance of scale, storms that erase trails, horizons that swallow sense of proportion. Perhaps that's why many Americans instinctively avoid living here. The emptiness exposes proportion. It reveals how small human plans appear against geological time. In crowded regions, people imagine control. In Nevada, they face its illusion. There's irony in that avoidance. The state Americans sidestep for being inhospitable also safeguards parts of their daily stability. Jet fighters train above its mesas. Nuclear deterrence quietly anchors beneath its restricted ranges. Power lines and natural gas corridors cross its valleys to feed cities far away. What appears as neglected wasteland functions as national backbone. Nevada's blank spaces are working spaces, silently supporting the machinery of modern comfort elsewhere. Maybe that's the ultimate twist. The emptiness most perceive as loss is actually utility disguised as vacancy. Silence is infrastructure here, distance is defense. The sparse population ensures both environmental purity and operational secrecy. What the rest of America avoids, it simultaneously depends on. That's the price of emptiness, sacrifice of habitation for functions nobody wants nearby, but everybody needs somewhere. As dusk settles across the Great Basin, lights from mining rigs glint like scattered embers, the only punctuation marks in miles of dark horizon. You begin to sense what Nevada truly represents, a ledger balancing presence and absence, dependence and independence, solitude and service. Its emptiness isn't deficit, it's design, an equilibrium where survival for a few sustains purpose for a nation. And when morning comes, sunlight spills over ranges that look the same as they did a century ago, unclaimed and unhurried. The world moves forward, but Nevada keeps its pace of stillness. In that stillness lies the answer. Emptiness here is not failure but function, America's holding pattern between wilderness and civilization. The rest of the country may avoid living in it, but it cannot live without it. The space America needs. People call Nevada empty, as if the desert somehow failed to attract enough life. But what if that silence isn't failure at all? What if Nevada's emptiness is exactly what America needs? Across 70 million acres, most of it federally controlled, the state functions less like a wasteland and more like the nation's backstage. The testing ground, the safety buffer, the archive of space itself. Its silence is structured, its distance deliberate. The desert didn't lose people, it was designed to keep them out. Nearly 4/5 of Nevada is managed by Washington, a patchwork of military ranges, nuclear sites, wildlife refuges, and wilderness zones. It's a state turned into strategy. Missiles and tortoises coexist within the same fences, solar projects sit beside bombing corridors. Here, America rehearses the future while preserving its past. Defense, conservation, experimentation, all sharing the same silence. Outsiders see emptiness, insiders recognize function. Las Vegas is the glowing exception, a single oasis engineered to survive by precision. It thrives only because everything beyond it stays untouched. Its recycled water, its strict conservation laws, its dependence on an overburdened river, they're proof that life in Nevada succeeds only when it admits its limits. Step beyond the lights, and the rules of the desert take over again. Emptiness reclaims its jurisdiction. So why does most of the nation avoid living here? Because Nevada exposes what America usually tries to hide, that control and humility share the same map. Every ghost town, every restricted valley, every dry basin tells the same story. Power built the emptiness, and the emptiness now guards power. It's the mirror of a civilization that fills every gap elsewhere, but leaves this one alone, for good reason. Nevada's true wealth isn't in what it produces, it's in what it prevents. In a crowded world, its vast spaces are the last frontier for silence, secrecy, and possibility. The desert's emptiness isn't a void to escape, it's the pause that keeps everything else contained. What most Americans avoid living in turns out to be the framework that lets the rest of the country live freely. Nevada's silence balances our noise. Its emptiness is policy turned poetry, a reminder that not every map needs filling. If you want to see how power hides in open spaces and how geography still writes the rules we live by, stay curious, subscribe, and keep exploring the places everyone else overlooks. Because sometimes, the emptiest spaces tell America's fullest truths.